Hi, boys and girls. It's Mrs. Larsen. I'm back to tell you another story. Now, this one is my favorite story from when I was a little girl. I loved hearing it. Every time my mom or dad were going to read to me, I would say I wanted this book. So this is it. It's the Elves and the Shoemaker. Very old classic story. And this story is retold by Suben. And let me get my glasses. Where did I put them? Here they are. Oh, much better. Okay, let's start. Once upon a time, there was a kind shoemaker. Though he worked very hard, he grew poorer and poorer. At last, he only had enough leather left to make one more pair of shoes. One winter night, he cut the leather out for shoes, but he was too tired to go any further. He left the leather on his workbench and decided to stitch the shoes together the next morning. The shoemaker went to bed, not knowing what he and his wife would do once the leather was used up. They had no money to buy more. Despite their troubles, the shoemaker and his wife slept soundly that night. Early the next morning, the shoemaker woke up and got dressed. Then he went into his shop to make his last pair of shoes. Once he sat down at his workbench, the shoemaker thought he must be dreaming. He blinked his eyes, and he blinked them again. But it was not a dream. On the very spot where he had left the leather the night before, there was a new pair of beautiful, well-made shoes, all finished. He called his wife into the shop and showed her the shoes. "They're splendid," she exclaimed. "But when did you make them?" "I didn't make them," the shoemaker replied. "I found them here in the morning." Look at those pretty shoes. Those are the ones. The shoemaker put the shoes in the window, hoping that somebody would buy them. Soon the door swung open, and a fine gentleman walked into the shop. "I must have these wonderful shoes," he said. "I've never seen any like them. The stitches are so small and delicate." The shoemaker sold the shoes to the gentleman, who paid a very high price for them. See, there's the gentleman. And there's that shoemaker putting the shoes on him. With the money, the shoemaker was able to buy enough leather to make 2 more pairs of shoes. And he had enough left over to buy a soup bone for dinner. That night, the shoemaker cut out the leather. But he was very hungry, and he could smell the soup his wife was cooking. "I'll make the shoes tomorrow," he said, and he went to eat dinner. So you can see where the soup smell is coming in, and he just can't stay away. He wants that soup. The next morning, he found 2 pairs of elegant shoes on his workbench. He showed them to his wife. "Who can be making these marvelous shoes?" she said. The shoemaker shook his head in wonder. Once again, the shoemaker placed the shoes in the window. He didn't have long to wait before the door swung open. This time there were 2 customers, and they both paid handsomely for the fine shoes. See the window? He's got the shoes in the window. Now the shoemaker had enough money to buy leather for 4 pairs of shoes. Things went on this way for quite some time. Every night the shoemaker cut the leather and went to sleep. Every morning he found more beautiful shoes on his workbench. The shoemaker and his wife were no longer poor. They sold many pairs of shoes that little by little they began to save money. One evening, the shoemaker said to his wife, "It's nearly Christmas, and we still don't know who is sewing all these shoes for us. We cannot go another day without finding out who it is." So together, the shoemaker and his wife thought of a plan. Instead of going to sleep that night, they hid behind the curtain in the shop. See them there, hiding behind the curtain? At midnight, 2 tiny elves skipped through the door into the room. The shoemaker and his wife watched in amazement as the elves quickly began to stitch and sew. Soon the bench was filled with handsome new shoes. But the moment their work was finished, the elves vanished. See how cute they are, those little elves working away on those shoes? The shoemaker and his wife were astonished. They decided they must do something for the tiny creatures who had been so kind to them. The elves were not wearing any coats or hats or shoes, said his wife. The poor little things must be very cold at this time of year. So the shoemaker and his wife made 2 tiny suits of clothing for the elves. The next night they laid the little clothes they had made on the table, and then they hid behind the curtain once again. See those cute little clothes they're making? Just at midnight, the elves came into the shop. When they saw the clothes, they were overjoyed. They hurried to try on the outfits and found that everything fit perfectly. In their brand new clothes, the elves danced around the room and sang a merry song. Look at those cute elves just dancing away. Don't they look cute? At last, the elves danced out the door of the shoemaker's shop, never to return again. The thankful shoemaker and his good wife had repaid kindness with kindness. They never wanted for anything and lived happily for the rest of their days. Look at that. Now, I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I did. I just love it. I love looking at the little elves. I love thinking about all those neat things that they made, those tiny little elves with their tiny little fingers sewing those little stitches, and how they helped the shoemaker and his wife. I think that that's a good motto to live by, to help other people. I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I enjoyed reading it to you. Remember, you are loved, and I will see you next time.